Your Inner Fish, written by Neil Shubin and published by Vintage Books in 2009. This book opens with a story from Neil Shubin about the first time he made a breakthrough discovery when he was on a fossil expedition north of the Arctic Circle. He found the fossils of a flat-headed fish, later named the Tiktaalik. This flat head showed the transition from water to land. Tiktaalik had an interesting structure for a fish. It had fins that were capable of supporting the body, which proved the water-to-land idea. One thing Shubin said was, the earliest creature to have the bones of our upper arm, our forearm, even our wrist and palm, also had scales and fin webbing. That creature was a fish. He said that on page 41. So every time you flex your wrist or shake your head, you can thank Tiktaalik and its Devonian cousins adapting to life in these ancient streams. Another topic Shubin covered that we also covered in class is how many animals are related by distant common ancestors. A way to see this is a pattern in animal limbs that Shubin called the one-bone, two-bone, lots of blobs pattern. This pattern underlies the architecture of all limbs. He gives examples of creatures that follow this pattern, including humans, seals, birds, lizards, penguins, bats, and humpback whales. He said despite radical changes in what limbs do and what they look like, this underlying blueprint is always present. He said that on page 31. In class, we briefly mentioned gill arches and how they tied into evolution. And in Your Inner Fish, they went into more detail of it. When a body is forming, we know that no one starts out with a head. We start as a blob with 4 little swellings. These little swellings are known as gill arches. The first gill arch forms the upper and lower jaws, 2 tiny ear bones, and all the muscles and vessels that supply them. The second arch forms another ear bone, a very small throat bone, and all the muscles that control your facial expressions. The third arch forms bones, muscles, and nerves in the throat, and finally the fourth gill arch forms the deepest parts of our throat and the parts of our larynx and the muscles and vessels around it that help it function. Over time, we have learned how we can use this knowledge to our advantage. Knowing something about this development can help us predict where to look for and what is missing in children who have certain birth defects. This history is not just in our bone, flesh, and muscle. It's in our DNA, and that's what connects us all the way back to our inner fish.